It's March of this year, and I'm going to an apartment viewing in the Junction. And I turn the corner to the street that the apartment is located on. And outside this antique shop, on the curb, in a box marked free, is a small bedside dresser drawer. And it's mid-century design, and it's kind of charming, and I think to myself, well, I'm gonna need furniture for wherever I move into, so pick it up, put it in the trunk of my car. Fast forward 4 months later, and I'm about to move into my new Junction flat, and I think to myself, oh right, that bedside dresser drawer that's collecting dust in the garage, I should probably grab the vacuum and give it a once-over. Open up the drawer, and inside it's full. Whoever put it out on the curb didn't clean it out first. Now there's a lot of garbage in there, right? So there's like empty glue sticks and Tiger Balm and baby powder everywhere. But in the back of the drawer, there's a small green tea tin. And I open it up, and there's costume jewelry inside. It's not anything I would wear, but I figure, you know, I could probably put this up on the Buns Trading Zone on Facebook for like tokens and tall cans, so set it aside. Next in the tea tin, I find a roll of film, lomography. And I don't know what, but something told me, hold on to this, put it aside. And then in the tin, I find la pièce de résistance, a $2 bill from 1954. And there's a young Queen Elizabeth II staring stoically out at me from behind a salmon and malachite background, and I'm like, what? So I take a photograph of the $2 bill, and I post it up on Buns with the caption, shout out to the people who put their dressers out on the curb without checking their drawers first. The post gets over 1,100 likes, and my mentions are blowing up. I was feeling very sassy. So dazzled was I by this find that could easily fetch anywhere from $50 to $1,000 at trade shows that I completely forgot about the roll of film until 3 weeks after I'd moved into my flat. And so out of boredom, curiosity, who knows what, I cycled over to Annex Photo, that's right over here, and I walked up to that angry old gruff man behind the counter, and I was like, has this roll of film been used? And he's like, yeah. Can you develop it for me? And he's like, this isn't yours, is it? And I was like, no, I found it. And I figured that if I develop it, I can figure out who it belongs to, and I can return it to them. And he's like, oh, like Amélie. For those of you who don't know the 2001 French film, Amélie is a woman who sets out to go do good deeds for strangers. In her flat, she finds a box of like toys and trinkets that belonged to a 5-year-old in the 1950s, and she sets out to return it to him. And when she does, her and the stranger suddenly feel light and airy, like the world is connected, and that if you do this one good deed for one person, you can change the world. And so I say to this gruff old man, yes, I am the Canadian Amélie. Because with great power comes great responsibility. I learned that from Harry Potter. And if I didn't do this, I'd be letting down that stranger, I'd be letting down my community, I'd be letting down strong women everywhere. Beyonce would be fuming at me. I don't think the old man knew who Beyonce was, but I reckon the rest of it resonated. So, 3 days and $15 later, I get 32 exposures back. And they are ethereally beautiful. They tell this complex story using chiaroscuro and framing and depth perception and juxtaposition. They're from a day out at High Park, and I can tell because there's the cherry blossoms and the capybaras and the ducks in the pond. And there's only 2 faces that appear in the whole roll of film. They're 2 men. One man is kind of thin and wiry and effeminate looking, and the other man has like shaggy hair and a scruffy beard. And I think to myself, because of the romantic nature of the photographs, I'm like, these guys are on a date in Hyde Park. This is fantastic. I can return it to them. Of course they're gonna want these back. So I take the best photographs of their faces that I can find, and I post them up on Buns, and I say, hey, does anyone know who these people are? I know it's not much to go on, but I found their roll of film, and these guys seem awesome. I wanna give them their negatives and give them a high five. I posted that at 7:04 p.m. My mentions immediately start blowing up. People are bumping it to the top of the feed to increase viewership. They're tagging their friends. Do you know who this person is? I think you know this guy. I know this guy. He looks familiar. By 7:12 p.m., Buns had found them. It only took 8 minutes. The effeminate-looking man's name was Paul, and the scruffy-looking man's name was Evan. So I messaged Paul first, and I'm like, hey, can you confirm that this is you and where these photographs were taken? And he's like, yeah, those are me, and they were taken in Hyde Park, but those photographs don't belong to me. I'm not the photographer. The photographer is my ex-girlfriend, Amanda, who ended up leaving me for Evan. And my stupid, solitary reply is, oh dear. And he says, no, there's no bad blood, it's all cool. But I immediately noticed that Paul and Evan are not Facebook friends. So I start asking him all these questions like, so is Amanda a photographer? And how long ago were these taken? And why did I find them on the side of the road? And like, why were they never developed? And he's reading all my messages. But the length of time it takes him to reply is getting more and more infrequent until finally he stops responding to me altogether. And I never heard from him again. So I move on to Evan, and I'm like, hey, can you confirm that this is you and where these photographs are taken? And he's like, yeah, that's me, and it was taken in Hyde Park. These were taken by Amanda, whom I don't speak to anymore. And I'm beginning to wonder what I've gotten myself into. He sends me the link to Amanda's Facebook profile so I can contact her myself, and he ends the message with, good luck. And I never heard from him again. 24 hours later, I finally got a hold of Amanda, and I'm like, this is an amazing story. So Buns helped me find you, and I have your roll of film, and isn't it great how we're all connected, and I can't wait to meet you. But her initial response is one of shame and embarrassment. And I have to assure her, no, there's nothing indecent on the roll of film. It's just a day out from Hyde Park. But she insists that I do not spread these photographs around. And it is in that moment that I realize no matter what happens, this isn't going to be like Amelie. Because all those people on Buns who helped me find Paul, Evan, and Amanda, they wanted to be part of this journey. They willingly put themselves forward. But Paul, Evan, and Amanda didn't. I had thrust it upon them. And so instead of everybody feeling light and airy and connected, I was salting old wounds and rehashing old arguments. But on top of all this negativity was starting to get right on my tits. So I meet up with Amanda at a cafe, and I slide the negatives to her across the table. I'm like, so you want to hear the story of how I found them? She's like, yeah. And I'm like, so I'm in the junction, and I'm at this intersection, and in front of this antique shop, and she stops me right there. And she's like, oh, yeah, I used to live above that antique shop. And the penny drops. You lived above it? Yeah. Above it? Yeah. Rewind to March, and the apartment viewing I was going to was located above that antique shop. And the man who opened the door, my would-be roommate, was a man named Kyle, and he says to me, my girlfriend is moving out, and this is her sewing room, and this can be your bedroom. And I saw her furniture and her clothes and her books and her decorations. In a way, I'd already been introduced to Amanda. Kyle offered me the room, and we shook hands, and it was a done deal, and I was all set to move in a few days later. But then he calls me up one day, and he's like, oh, my friend wants the room, and I have to give him preference. And I was like, well, this is not cool and totally unprofessional. Like, we shook hands. You can't flake on me like this. And he gave me some cock and bull story. But it didn't matter, because a few days later, I was offered another flat in the Junction, which is actually just a block away from where Kyle lives. And I had not thought at all about that strange experience from earlier this year, right up until the moment that Amanda is sitting across from me at this cafe and looking at me with these disapproving eyes. And I could not blame her, because not only did I now know the details of 3 of her ex-boyfriends, I had almost lived with one of them. So Amanda takes the negatives, and I can tell by the way she's holding them that she's gonna throw these out. She doesn't care about them. She gave me a potted cactus plant for my troubles, and I never saw or heard from her again. But I kept the developed photographs. They now hang up on my wall. They tell a beautiful story using color and light of love, burning within the last dying embers of a summer. So I figure someone ought to appreciate them.